Today on CityCast Nashville, we're diving into the news that Old Tent City, a long-standing homeless encampment on the banks of the Cumberland, is set to be cleared in less than 60 days. Local service providers received no prior notice, only a press release sent to select media outlets and letters handed out on site. Judith Tackett, former director of the Metro Homeless Impact Division, joins to help us understand the situation, as well as the ramifications of the encampment clearing bill that's making its way through the state legislature. It's Monday, April 7th. I'm your host, Marie Cecile Anderson, and this is what Nashville's talking about. The mayor's office just served Old Tent City on Anthus Drive with an eviction notice. This is after a lot of controversy last fall when the city decided they needed to tear down the hand-built homes that residents had constructed there due to safety concerns. Let's start with the very basics, because I think maybe a lot of people don't know. What is, or rather should I say, what was Old Tent City?
So Old Tent City is a location down by the river, close at the railroad tracks south of downtown. It's in walking distance for people to downtown. It's been there since I've been working on homelessness for over 20 years. Then in the 2010 flood, it got flooded out real badly. And so there was an effort to immediately assist people, help prevent them from drowning, basically. It was always one of the largest encampments in town, and for a time there, because it was also not safe to go back there with contamination and all of that after the 2010 flood. It was kind of gone and then slowly built back up over years, because it's just a location that's, as I said, in walking distance to services and where people can exist that have nowhere else to go. It's out of sight. But right before COVID, I was still working at Metro. I was the director of the Homeless Impact Division then. And Metro Parks came, we had a really good relationship. They came to me and were very transparent and said, we are working on a master plan on a park. It was called Wharf Park. And they're like, we're just starting this process. We want to come to you. We want to come to the community for transparency reasons. This is going to happen. There are 2 years. We know there is an encampment down there. We are purchasing the property. It needs to move. So we know it's not easy to find housing. So let's work with the community over a few years to get that done. And then COVID hit, and everything changed. I left and I don't know what happened with any of the plans. But before that all happened, there were community meetings. All the providers were notified that this is on the horizon in a few years. But here's where we are right now. We always knew that's going to come. So it's not a huge surprise, but I am really emotional about why the city has not kept up with the transparent approach, why it's been such a big secret about the timing. And what frankly disgusts me a little is how the leadership right now from OHS, the Office of Homeless Services, including the mayor's office, because this is not done in isolation, is focused on the messaging more than on serving people.
Tell me more about what you mean.
So when you look at press releases, in general, with the encampment closure, the terminology housing search really bugs me. Because when you look at Old Tent City, we all knew the Office of Homeless Services has gone on record last summer that they have a location for temporary housing, a motel on Wallace Road in South Nashville, and they kept beds open to close encampments. Well, there have been about 80 beds open for about a year. Now they're calling this a housing search. How is something that you keep beds open a housing search when it doesn't add housing, and it's not even permanent housing? We also have data from the Office of Homeless Services and Metro that the people that have been in the temporary housing out there, on average, were there for close to a year. So you have used this motel for 2 years. You have spent, I just did this calculation for a column I do in the Contributor. You have spent, and I'm very conservative with this, about $5 million on, to serve 142 people. But when you keep 80 beds open for a year, that cost per person per year is just very, very high. I think over $37,000 per person that was spent. And that means people are still in temporary housing. It's pretty much a shelter. They're still homeless. Some of the terms in public messaging that I've heard or seen using, we cannot leave people down there and languish down there. Well, you've kind of done it, Metro. You haven't housed people over the last year and gave them an option to go inside, even in your temporary beds for the past year. Why did you keep them open?
So who's responsible for this?
The city. And I'm actually very supportive in general of what local governments can do. I just think we made a shift towards propaganda rather than truly putting people first. We're using a lot of nice terminology that the general public, it's like, oh, they care. And if you're not with them, you don't care. But for folks in the nonprofit field, for folks that really try to learn about the complexities of homelessness, one, this is not housing first. This is not a housing search. And we could have served people over the course of a year with a very solid team of healthcare professionals, psychiatrists, outreach workers, all of that during all this time. It doesn't have to be, oh, we keep it all secret because we need to notify these people first. You had a whole year to talk to them every day and tell them this is coming and prepare them for it, and then be transparent with the community and answer council members' questions. It's a leadership issue, it's a policy issue, and it is just not harm reduction.
So you mentioned propaganda. Metro is giving residents 60 days to vacate. We heard from advocates, like you mentioned, that this came as a shock to them because they read it in the media before they were contacted by the city to help. How is this supposed to work?
I don't know. It's like, that's a question really for the city. But for me, it's like when you look at the timing on Monday, it's like media was informed first. The council member of the district, as far as I know, was not informed before the media, even though he had asked for updates, as far as I know, throughout the process.
Is that Coupon? That's his district?
Yes.
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 Mm-hmm.
And you need to talk to him about how he feels about that. I don't know. But I just think that's a big red flag for some type of secrecy, and it's like, why is this secret? Why do you control the message? There is a media protocol trying to control who can talk to whom. And in essence, what Metro doesn't understand, you are also taking voice away from the people that live there when you try to restrict how media can talk and who they can talk to. Again, you had a whole year, Metro, to work with media on what trauma-informed conversations could look like and what that looks like. That's actually something I would encourage. I have a lot of questions logistically about, I was down there actually twice this past month, unrelated, just talking to people. And one of the questions, I saw a lot of pets down there, a lot of dogs. 60 days is not enough. And that's a huge shock for anybody down there. When you have to separate from pets and what happens to pets, there were a lot of campers down there. What happens to your physical home in a sense? It's not
right.
Just a tent, It's not easy to do this. I've been involved in encampment closures and it's not easy and it's always controversial. But the thing that you can do is be honest, transparent, and just do media relations and not propaganda.
Well, according to the mayor's office, Old Tent City has been home to human trafficking and other awful crimes. And that's a big reason why it needs to close. What do you say to that?
It's not about closing it. All I'm saying is there needs to be transparency. And why haven't you worked on this for a whole year already? Why is it, here's a notification and we're going to do this because we need to notify the people down there first? Well, haven't you talked to them if you're really down there working with them? Aren't they notified that this is about to drop?
Right. And didn't work with local service providers or anything. Just, yeah. It really dehumanizes.
Yes. It makes people like an object that you move when you're ready.
And if the possibility is because they want to like you said, a park of some sort, or, they want to reclaim that land and develop it.
Again, my question is not whatever the reasons are. It's just be transparent, be open about it, have discussions. And yes, it's not easy and you're always going to get pushback. But I've gone through these things and have represented Metro with service providers. We did not see eye to eye, but we're still have good relationships because you can be honest and transparent, and that's what builds respect. And I think fundamentally, that's just not happening with leadership. I don't care how Metro and the mayor's office, because that's directly under the mayor's office, changes that leadership and strengthens it. That's not up to me to decide, but we need truly, fundamentally, more solid leadership around homelessness. We need the understanding that Metro is separate from the continuum of care service providers, but that they are linked. I also want to go on record. I do see a lot of talent in the staff at Office of Homeless Services. I think some of them are working really, really hard, but they also deserve the leadership to really shine.
Well, one thing we've also noticed, fencing going up under bridges here in town. And apparently they're designed to prevent unhoused folks from sleeping in those sheltered spaces. The news reported on the fence under I-65 in Berry Hill. I've also noticed it's under I-65 bridge at Trinity Lane in my neighborhood. Why do you think Nashville is doing this now?
I don't think it's Nashville necessarily. This is probably state property and TDOT.
Gotcha.
There is a bill right now that's moving through the state that is focused on TDOT removing these type of encampments. Again, I think this is it used to have like a 64 million fiscal note. That fiscal note, meanwhile, has disappeared, which to me means, okay, so that bill, real quickly, as I understand it right now in its current format, it was passed in the Senate. It's still moving through the House committee system, but it would require TDOT would authorize TDOT to enter MOUs with local municipalities and local counties, to remove encampments when any citizen makes a complaint. And then it has some timelines of within 10 days, they can remove all the belongings of people. And within 30 days of that complaint, the encampment has to be removed. And it's really focused on highways, right-of-way, under bridges, property like that. Now, there are already laws on the book that make camping on public property illegal. What concerns me now, any citizen, we know there are some in Nashville that will do this, that have proven they're already doing that, will go, point out encampments, make a complaint, and then there's 30 days and they have to be gone without any housing, any services, any dollars for supports, moving costs, housing, location, any of that. So that's really about making a policy to move people out of sight. And when you really think about it, whether it's Old Tent City, whether it's any encampment policy, whether it's state, whether it's federal policies, they're all about making homelessness invisible and not truly solving it for people. There is a huge frustration that's justified with politicians from both parties. I want to stress that's from both parties, where when homelessness becomes invisible, and when you see people suffer, when you see citizens' complaints where people are scared to go to a park with their kids, there is a lot of frustration out there. But that requires leadership that is transparent, honest, and says, here's what we can do, here's what we can't do, here's the resources that we need to do it, and have a plan around that at least is, and here's what we're working towards. But we don't have that here in Nashville, and we don't have that in the state.
It just seems out of sight, out of mind. Like, just get it out of my sight lines and let somebody else deal with it. I don't even know who I don't know. It's...
I used to have a saying where I would just tell people, look, Band-Aids don't work anymore. It's one of those Band-Aids, when you've overused it and it's like that
that's
and
wet
doesn't
and
stick anymore.
Right.
Yeah. So that's still the approach that we're taking. We're just putting nice words around it. And we come in as, oh, we're doing harm reduction, or we're doing housing first, or we're following HUD requirements. Are you still going to follow HUD requirements when HUD is changing under the current federal administration and tells you to lock people up? Is that what you're still doing? Or are you going to build local leadership that actually looks at what we need down here, builds coalitions to really, really focus on how we can be transparently housing people and increasing that? And if we can't do it, then say why we can't do it and have discussions around that so everybody understands.
I want to talk about the legislation. Growing up here in Nashville, I did attend Westminster Presbyterian Church. A lot of Republicans and lawmakers, some of these lawmakers attended my church, and, we were instilled all these values. What I want to ask, though, is does this legislation match these Christian values that I was taught growing up here that these men claim to represent?
It's a question that we need to ask them every time we see them.
Right. It just doesn't make sense to me.
So I've been working on a podcast called In My Place. It airs once a month on Nashville Public Radio on homelessness. It's a homelessness series together with the team there. That's why I've been out in encampments and talking to people on the streets. And what I just starting to see more and more is we need to change how we do outreach, street outreach. We need to really focus on building a team approach with healthcare, with psychologists, psychiatrists, with just really lining up what are the resources that these outreach teams need. I've talked to a former colleague of mine who was an outreach worker, and he said when COVID dollars came in, his outreach changed because all of a sudden he had a key in his hand. He had options to help people to get actually to housing, and the conversation immediately changed from, oh, I need water, I'm fine, I'm not working on housing, to, oh, I need to see you about housing. People know when you actually have housing for them. We also need to listen and understand that some people cannot go to a mass shelter because mass shelters are not set up to take care of people with severe disabilities that need 24/7 care or that need assistance to go to the restroom because they are blind. So we started that process by improving our homeless management information system database, which is, if you don't have a database, you cannot follow where people are. It helps you connect. And I've seen lately that Metro Street Outreach has focused more on entering people in the database as a service in and on, in itself, rather than as a tool to link to services. Everybody needs to be linked to services. I also have seen that there isn't always consistency. I've heard that from people talking to them. It's like, oh, then I've worked with an outreach worker and then never seen them, or seen them again 3 months later and they introduced themselves like I haven't met them before, even though they said they would work on my birth certificate. That's stories I'm hearing out there. But then there are some outreach workers that are very well trained, have done it for years, and they're completely underpaid. The people out there should have the higher salaries. They should be specialists. They should be, if you invest in the right training, the folks who work out there should be some of the highest paid people in this job. And they should be teams that maybe follow people into housing and stick with them for a while. We just really need to rethink that.
Judith, why did you leave Metro?
That's a question I get a lot. And it goes back to where I did not lead an own department. I was housed within Metro Social Services, and I just couldn't be the leader that I think needed to happen. At that time, I felt I was left out on decision-making processes around homelessness and brought out when there was somebody to be blamed. And I was like, this is not about people anymore. This is about how we look. And I was getting into, frankly, internal fights because I was pushing back hard. And I was like, look, I can't be the leader that obviously I feel I need to be for people out there. I was also told not to collaborate the way I wanted to collaborate with nonprofits, and I just couldn't stand for it. I cannot do work that way.
So if you were leading our Office of Homeless Service now, what would your first action be?
First of all, I want to go on record. I wouldn't go back to a job that I had. I would want somebody new to come in. But the first action for somebody to come in My advice would be to just focus on the team, stabilize the team, because you have very talented people there. There has to be frustration. I don't know the team. I just see that they're working really, really hard. And I think there needs to be some retraining on what it really means to do housing first and certain best practices in trauma-informed care, how to use HMAS in a more systems-oriented way, and then rebuilding trust and really understanding that it's as Metro in an office like that, it is your responsibility to build trust. You can't just go out there and demand it. Now, if you have $50 million to hand out, you can do that, but that $50 million is going to run out. The real partners out of an office like that should be service providers. I'm not saying service providers should not tell Metro what to do, but they should have input and understand what Metro does to really have an understanding of what true collaboration and cross-sector partnerships looks like. I would also really look at just within Metro. I always felt there are so many entry points where people who struggle with housing touch so many different departments, but there was never a true, here's how we work together. It's a lot of times, we go into a meeting, we check in once a month, checkbox.
How close is an average American to being homeless?
I know probably about as much as you do on that, but it's very much closer than we think. I've heard reports that it can be a few $100s away. You know, you miss one paycheck and you struggle. I've talked to people in downtown Nashville who I met on the street a few years ago. I remember this one guy and I was like, why are you out here? You know, just once you talk, it's like, and why are you also not in a shelter? And there are two things he said. One is he came from another county in Tennessee. He had to get away. He went through rehab. He's sober. He had to get away from his friends. So he chose to come to Nashville because there were construction jobs here. And he's like, all I need is have a few weeks where I can save up my money for a deposit, but one of the things is people don't have the savings to do all that. And then I'm like, why are you outside? Why are you sleeping outside? And he's like, well, if you go to a mass shelter, it's smelly, it's loud, you can't sleep. I have 12-hour shifts because I really, really want to save up so I can get into an apartment. I sleep better on here. The other thing is also we focus again on visible homelessness. We forget that in Nashville, student homelessness has increased, which is a real good indication that family homelessness has increased. Last school year, there were 4,500 students registered as homeless. That was like a 26 or 27% increase over the year before. That is huge. I'm all for let's focus on chronic homelessness and get people indoors, but a real system needs to also pay attention to other populations that may not fit the federal HUD definition of in shelter or outdoors, because these kids are going to be the ones that are going to become chronic if we don't intervene early on. The youth are going to become chronic homelessness if we don't intervene early on. We need truly to have a more systems-oriented conversation in our city. I do know the city, since I've left, has about tripled its own budget into homelessness, but nobody talks about how do we spend that. It's about $6 million. The Office of Homeless Services has about a $6 million budget. How do we spend that? I have no clue.
Oh, this conversation is hard. It's a hard conversation to have, and I'm sure our listeners are at home feeling frustrated. What can they do?
Number one is just, if you really want to know, ask your council member, call the mayor's office, ask, what is the sustainability plan? We had $50 million invested. Ask, how was the money spent? Don't ask for outputs. Ask for outcomes. Output is, let's just say, if I have $50 million and give everybody an outfit and food and set them up in shelter for a little while, I can say I've served thousands of people.
Right.
So really look at what the service was. And I'm not saying that's what the city did. There is a lot of, and there are reports that look at data Unfortunately, right now, I also have to say I'm very careful when I look at any of the reports. I always find mistakes, simple math mistakes. When I read those reports, I have more questions than answers. It's not true analysis. It's a lot of output. And again, it's targeted to look good. And I once told a council member to just ask questions, because when everything goes great and looks great in homelessness, something isn't right.
Oh, Judith. Well, we've come to our conclusion, but always we'd love to have you come back. Lots of things that we're going to keep our eye on going forward.
I want to end on a positive note.
Okay. Yes, please.
Homelessness is solvable.
Really? Okay.
Homelessness is solvable. When you look at veterans' investments, veteran homelessness, in 2010, the federal government decided we're going to reduce veteran homelessness. Our veterans don't deserve to be on the streets or in shelters and linger there. So they put into rental assistance plus support services, and meanwhile reduced veteran homelessness by 55%. We know what to do. I think we need to go away from having the nice words, and, it's like we can do that internally in certain sectors and just do what's reasonable. I personally, that's how I got into homelessness, by helping. We were a group that had no clue about homelessness, that befriended a homeless person who was definitely chronically homeless, severe mental illness, all type of issues, health issues. And we just were like, oh, let's do a fundraiser, raise some money for rent, lease an apartment, and then let's get some professional help around him, and we check on him as a support system. So it's like, it's not just lease, it's not just getting people things. It's really that support that we need to invest. It's not one size fits all. But when you really think about it, we know what the solutions are. So we shouldn't be discouraged. We just need to have accountability, transparency, and honesty in the conversation. And I know there are other cities that have made progress. We can do it too.
I really appreciate this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. And thanks for all you do. I love the show.
Oh, well, we love you. Thank you. That's all for today here on CityCast Nashville. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell your friends? Rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Nashville newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Doodles.